Well, hello, fungi friends. It's been a while since I streamed, but I had something important that I wanted to do and say. I've been putting it off for quite a while, but I think it's time. So I'm just going to rip the band-aid off and get to it. I wrote a book. I spent 3 years of my life writing this book called Passport to Kingdom Fungi, and this book contains pretty much everything I wanted to know about fungi when I was getting started. And when I was a newbie, I couldn't find a good resource that really collected everything together in a way that made it accessible and easy to understand. And so I made a book that answered all my questions. And I'm hoping it'll be a resource for you guys that you can go to for many years to come, at the start of your mushroom journey, because this is very much built for beginners, but there's enough depth and sort of breadth to it that as you go through your educational journey, it will still be useful to you as an expert and as a reference guide for literally the rest of your life as you continue to kind of expand the scope of how much fungi is impacting your life and how many different ways you realize it's showing up. And my big issue with this book is I love it and I'm super happy the way it came out, but because there's so many photos and illustrations, because it's just full of all sorts of photos and great infographics and stuff like that, my publisher won't do an audio version of the book because they said it would be too difficult to describe all of the different photos and illustrations in there, which I understand and sympathize with, but I was sort of frustrated by it because there's a big accessibility issue for people who uh, are sight challenged and have trouble reading the text, or for people who just straight up like to listen to audiobooks. I know plenty of people are like that. It makes this book a little bit harder to access. And that was the biggest thing in making this book full of photos and illustrations is I wanted it to be really accessible. I wanted people to be able to flip to any page in the book and access what was in there and really get into it. And because they're not willing to do an audio version of the book, I feel like the access is limited for certain populations of people who either want the audio version or can't read the text. And so, in a very unofficial way, not sanctioned by the publisher, I believe I have the right to do this, where I'm going to just read to you parts of the book bit by bit and talk about it a little bit because this is very similar to what I've done on other live streams. But I figure if I put it all into a playlist here on YouTube and ideally post some of the audio of this to my Patreon, then you guys will have access to sort of an unofficial audio version of the book with some extra commentary by me. And I'd love to figure out a way to add visuals to this. And I think maybe for the YouTube, I might just try to show you guys like a photo of the book that I'm talking about. But inherently, this is going to be lacking some of the visual components. And so I'll do my best to kind of describe things and talk about them as we go along. And we'll see if I actually make it to the end of the book and turn this into a real series or not. But I'm going to give it a go because you got to start somewhere. And even if I end up redoing this in the future in a different way or maybe in a more official capacity, which would be nice, at least this is a starting point. So let's get reading. This is Dr. Fungi's Passport to Kingdom Fungi, a scientist's guide to the wild and wonderful world of mushrooms, molds, and more. So this is a book I put a lot of effort, time, and love into, and I'm hoping you guys appreciate it. So on the back, I'll just read you a quick description. Learn the basics of fungal biology, ecology, foraging, and identification in this in-depth illustrated introduction from the biochemist and lifelong mushroom enthusiast behind Fascinated by Fungi. That'd be me. I'm Gordon Walker. Hi. So read you the inside cover here, just to give you a sense of what this is all about. So in Dr. Fungi's Passport to Kingdom Fungi, Dr. Gordon Walker brings his scientific knowledge and love of everything fungi to the page. The first section of this book is written in a comprehensive question and answer format, starting with what are fungi? You'll learn about everything from what mycelium is and fungi's evolution and biochemistry to how they are classified and how they impact our world today. You will also find information on best foraging practices and culinary techniques. The second half of this book introduces you to mushroom identification skills and profiles, various mushrooms and other fungi, from incredible edibles to what you can find in the wild to the dangerously toxic, medicinal, and just plain weird. Finally, you'll find fungal phenomenon showing the amazing breadth and diversity of the fungal kingdom. With colorful and comprehensive science illustrations, mushroom photography, and QR codes linking to resources to help you continue your fungal explorations, this is the perfect portal to step through into the world of mushrooms. So that's kind of the marketing material version of all this stuff. But I will read you guys a little bit of the foreword by Eugenia Bone and the introduction that I wrote. and then I'll sign off for now, and hopefully we will continue this. So just flipping through the book here for a second. Here's a table of contents. And like I said, sort of as I described it, the book is split into two. The first half is a question answer format where you can kind of flip through, ask a question, what are fungi? What are mushrooms? How do they grow? Where do they fruit? That kind of stuff. And get it like a sort of a paragraph sized answer. So it's a little bit, bite sized. And then the second half of the book is a bunch of fungal profiles. And so I'll definitely read through the first 10 chapters in this question answer format because I think that's pretty easy to do. I'll discuss the infographics as we go along. And we'll see when I get to the mushroom profiles. I'm not quite sure how to do those because they're a little bit harder to narrate and talk about without showing you guys the photos, because very much mushrooms are hard to describe through words, much easier to show pictures of, which is again part of why the publisher decided not to do an audio version of the book, but we'll figure it out as we go along. And if nothing else, I can at least read you guys what I wrote about different kinds of mushrooms. So here's the foreword by Eugenia Bone, who has been a huge inspiration to me. She's a prolific author who's written a bunch of great books. Micropia, she authored a bunch of cookbooks that are really good. She's a New York Times author. She's been a huge inspiration to me and was very instrumental in me figuring out how to write this book and the actual logistics of me doing it. So I owe her a huge debt of gratitude, and I will tell you, go check out her books. She's got a bunch of great ones. Micropia was what kind of got me to get into Mycopia. Sorry, Mycopia is the name of the book. Micropia is a museum in Amsterdam that was also very inspiring. But Mycopia is the name of her book, and she wrote another one cool too called "Have a Good Trip." It's all about sort of the perils and pitfalls of magic mushrooms, as well as what the positive things they can bring to your life. Either way, check out Eugenia Bone, phenomenal author. So here's the foreword she wrote for me. I met Gordon in 2019 when he asked me to chat with him about fungi on Instagram. I was aware of his mushroom account, where he'd acquired a substantial following with his enthusiastic science-based identification, impressive cooking demonstrations, and mushroom tapping ASMR videos. I was flattered to learn that Gordon had been inspired by my book I wrote about mushrooms, mushroom hunting, and the mycophile community a decade ago. That's Mycopia. I'm sorry. The name of the book is Mycophilia. God, I should have double-checked that before I got going. Anyway, her name of her book is Mycophilia, as in love of mushrooms. Back then, when I would mention to a dining companion that I was into mushrooms and molds, rotters, they would start looking around the table to see if they could switch seats with someone. But these days, the chances are pretty good that whoever I am seated beside will be very curious about mushrooms, especially their purported therapeutic capabilities, their culinary attributes, the endorphin rush of foraging, and the awesomeness of realizing there's a whole realm of complex life right under their feet, which is very cool. Fungi are sort of all around us all the time, hidden and cryptic and just hiding in plain sight, which I love too. I think it's really compelling. Lots of folks who are into mushrooms today first become hooked based on fantastic claims about fungi's power to solve complicated problems like pollution and depression. If only corporate agriculture, pharmaceutical giants, and federal drug prohibitions would get out of the way. That's her commentary there. And I agree. With a little digging, however, they discover that mushrooms aren't panaceas, and complicated problems are complicated for a reason, usually lots of reasons. But when it comes to mushrooms, all passive curiosity regarding their edibility and properties as functional foods, how they interact in ecosystems, their potential as a source of new materials, eventually lead to mycology, the study of fungi. For example, I started my fungal journey waiting to find morels for dinner, or wanting to find morels for dinner. To find the mushroom, I had to understand why it grows, where it grows, so I learned about the fungal's symbiotic relationship with certain species of trees, and then I became curious about the nature of that symbiosis. Before I knew it, I'd fallen down the rabbit hole of mycology, which ended up being the window through which I came to understand nature in a deeper way. Such is the inevitable and truly rewarding result of getting serious about mushrooms. Dr. Fungi's passport to Kingdom Fungi is for those who are ready to explore Kingdom Fungi beyond the claims and clicks, who want to understand nature in a deeper way. In these pages, you will find the means to navigate this vast, complex, and still little understood realm of life, one that interacts with all other biotic and abiotic systems. You'll be introduced to a myriad kinds of fungi, not just those that produce mushrooms, their unique methods of reproduction, the spectrum of lifestyles they represent, from decomposers to mutualists to parasites and everything in between, and how they relate to the organisms around them. Gordon provides all this and yet strikes a balance between the lively summaries you want to hear and the hardcore science you need to know. And the benefit of acquiring this knowledge is tremendous, because through the lens of a little basic mycology, you can see ecosystems, basically being able to see the forest through the trees. Can you get the bigger picture? And that's what this book's all about, helping you see both the minuscule and the macro details that help you understand everything as a whole. Gordon is among the leaders of a new wave of mycophiles cut from the same cloth as the late, great Gary Linkoff, who famously said, "You should give up whatever job you have, just quit. Just stop now and devote the rest of your life to mushrooms." And I took Gary's advice to heart because I have done that. They're dedicated to awakening the notion that nature is way more entangled than most of us imagine. They know that meeting the ecological challenges of our times requires an appreciation of nature's complexity, and one way to expand their consciousness is to understand the role the fungi play in nature. Because mushrooms themselves are not miracle workers, the miracle is what they can teach us about life. So I'm eternally grateful for all the work that Eugenie has done and the kind words that she put in my foreword. So let's get reading. This is the introduction to my book, Passport to Kingdom Fungi. My fascination with fungi has deep roots in my childhood. In the summers, my family would make the drive from Boston up to Lake Tremblant, a couple hours outside of Montreal, to spend time at my grandparents' cabin, surrounded by a richly diverse forest, populated with paper birch and pine trees, along with numerous animal denizens. While walking through the woods, I would see mushrooms popping up through the deep, lush layers of fallen leaves and pine needles on the forest floor. One day, a particularly slimy green mushroom caught my attention. This was the aptly named parrot mushroom, Gliophorus pistatus. I can never say this. Pistatacinus? Either way, parrot mushroom. Known for its slippery green cap and brilliant yellow stem, that's the features of that mushroom. As an enthusiastic child, I was convinced that this strange-looking organism must be an alien life form from another planet, right? Something small and green and slimy. Gotta be an alien. I was 4. How else could something so otherworldly come to be here unless it was extraterrestrial? My grandfather patiently explained to me that it was, in fact, a mushroom. And it belonged to a group of other brightly colored types known as wax caps. And I give you a page reference to where I talk about wax caps in the book. At the same time, I was skeptical, but that little alien-looking mushroom helped seed a lifelong obsession. So I remember sort of being like, I don't know, Granddad, this is like kind of slimy, weird, but it caught me, and that sort of seeded some really early fascination for me, which then carried on through a few more experiences that I talk about here in the introduction. But this is part of why I'm so fascinated by fungi. And I'm just giving you my origin story a little bit here. So, a passion for mushrooms and a love of nature run in my blood. I did not know it when I was getting started. My great-grandmother was an avid mushroom hunter. My parents have also played an important role in shaping and guiding my fascinations. My father is a biology professor who instilled within me the central dogma of biology at a young age, along with a love for gardening and cooking. My mother's a computer programmer turned artist who taught me to appreciate both technical details and the intricate nuances of natural textures. It was through the lens of my family's enthusiasm for knowledge and nature that I learned to see the world. When I was around 5, my mother and I came across a sizable puffball while out on a walk in Massachusetts. She recognized it as an edible mushroom, so we carefully plucked it from the grassy field and brought it home. Sweet, nutty aromas filled the air as we fried it in butter. I got my first taste of this pillowy, soft puffball and was immediately hooked on mushroom foraging, drawn in by the allure of finding delicious food out in the woods. And I do like legitimately remember this at like age 5, eating that first bite of puffball and sort of this like soft, savory marshmallow tofu thing going on that like blew my mind. I was like, wait, you can find this stuff like for free in the woods? What? And it wasn't just the fact that mushrooms tasted good. It was the fact that these like wild mushrooms were like unobtainable. You can't go to the grocery store and buy a puffball, but you can go out after like a bunch of rain and find a perfect one. Wonderful. It's one of the things I love so much about foraging and hunting for mushrooms is it's sort of the ephemeral, impermanent nature of them being out there, and getting to go find them is a real thrill. So, We never found another puffball in the same spot, but there were plenty of other mushrooms closer to home. When we cut down an old tree in the yard, my father decided to inoculate the stump with chicken of the woods, plug spawn. It's little like dowels inoculated with mycelium. A year later, when I had completely forgotten about my initial excitement, because I was super excited when we were plugging up the log, but mushrooms take a long time to like colonize wood and end up fruiting out. I'd forgotten about it. I was young, attention span was like a goldfish. Uh, a year later, when I had completely forgotten my initial excitement, brilliant orange and yellow growths spewed forth from the decaying stump. And so, for people on YouTube, here's a little picture of chicken of the woods, those big orange yellow polypore shells, and then also a beautiful little kind of slimy green parrot mushroom there. So get a look at that. There we go. All right. We carefully harvested the soft, supple shells and brought them inside to pan fry in butter. My mind was blown when I tried a piece and found it had a virtually identical texture and flavor to chicken. And chicken of the woods really does have a chicken-like texture. And if you cook it up in kind of butter and salt, and it ends up tasting like whatever you cook it in, and it is not far off from being like chicken, although it's not an exact replica of it. As a budding chef, and I loved to cook when I was a kid, still do as an adult, I was immediately enthralled by the endless, delicious culinary possibilities of this meaty mushroom. And chicken of the woods is still one of the meatiest mushrooms that's out there. It's really impressive. During a particular wet fall, large clusters of mushrooms began appearing around the base of our decrepit apple tree. We had an old tree in the yard, it's kind of dying. I was chomping at the bit to eat this fantastic flush of fruiting bodies. And a flush is when you have a big fruiting of mushrooms. And fruiting bodies is another way to refer to mushrooms that sort of differentiates it from the mycelium below. The fruiting bodies are the temporal, sort of ephemeral mushroom thing, like a fruit or a flower. It's not the actual organism. The organism is the mycelium that's down in the wood or in the soil, whatever. We'll talk about it later in the book. We referenced our books and guessed that they were honey mushrooms, which are malaria. My ever-cautious parents decided we should seek the advice of a mycologist. We harvested one of the clusters and brought it into the Boston Mycological Club to have our suspicions confirmed. They did confirm that these were indeed honey mushrooms, but advised consuming them with caution, as they can cause gastrointestinal upset. Undeterred by this warning, I set about cooking up the caps, finding the texture slimy, but the flavor scrumptious. Fortunately, I experienced no discomfort. I know now that when I cook honey mushrooms, they're really slimy, so I like to kind of boil them first, get off some of the slime, and then cook them down after. Lessens the chance of any GI upset. So we made plans to go on a foray that fall, but then disaster struck. I became a anxious, pimply preteen, and everything associated with my parents that I once thought was cool suddenly became profoundly uncool, including mushrooms. So I became kind of mycophobic through a lot of my teenage years because I just didn't know, didn't care, was interested in other stuff. My fascination with fungi faded into the background as I spent much of my high school and college years preoccupied with the ocean, focused on sailing and scuba diving, which I still love. However, my interest in fungi was reignited by the delightfully bubbly beverage known as beer. Surprise, surprise, college kids like drinking beer. The captain of our sailing team at UC Santa Cruz was an avid home brewer, my buddy Reed, who kept several tasty concoctions on tap at all times. In the process of learning about the technical aspects of beer making, I came face to face, metaphorical face, with fungi again, this time in the form of yeasts, single-celled fermentative organisms. I found myself particularly intrigued by how different strains of yeast could dictate the style of beer, and how by manipulating fermentation conditions, you could influence the aroma produced by the yeasts. The desire to dive deeper into the biochemistry of yeast drove me to apply to UC Davis for graduate school, and I joined the lab of Dr. Linda Basson. For my graduate research, I studied how nutrition and microbial communities impact the performance of yeast during the fermentation of wine. This experience primed me to embrace self-directed learning, critical thinking, and taught me how to communicate complex scientific concepts to diverse audiences. Most importantly, it forced me to empathize with fungi to better understand life from the perspective of my yeasty test subjects. And that was the thing I had to do a lot. It's like, I'm working on single-celled fungi. You can't apply human logic to that. So I had to put myself into their place and understand where they were coming from to better understand the sort of overall arc of my research, as well as how to ask better questions to assess what they're doing, right? Because we can't apply human logic to like what a single-celled fungi does. So it was a real learning experience for me to try to put myself in the place of a yeast. I learned a lot. After completing my PhD, I spent time traveling and ended up living in New Zealand for several months. I was working on writing up my research from grad school for publication, but I found the allure of nature a necessary distraction for my mental health. I had to get outside. I was stir crazy. Thanks to multiple typhoons that washed over the island that year, we were in the North Island, I was able to find a variety of mushrooms that rekindled my childhood fascination. My gateway finds were the delightfully fuzzy light brown mushrooms known in Maori as tawaka, or Cyclocybe parasitica. It looks a lot like a piapini mushroom, kind of brown and slightly fuzzy. Uh, and and the diminutive but brilliant orange pore conch, the Favolotia calicera. It's sort of a little tiny thing that grows in deadwood and has little pores underneath it. Show a quick picture of it here for those of you on YouTube. So the Cyclocybe and Favolotia. After first finding Tawaka on a hike, I dove deep into online resources, but without the knowledge or language to describe it, I found identification difficult. Thankfully, a friend on Instagram was able to tip me off to its identity, setting the stage for me to use social media as a mechanism for learning about and sharing my mushroom finds. I started posting pictures and descriptions of mushrooms on Instagram in 2017, never expecting that it would fundamentally alter the course of my life. My symbiotic relationship with social media has nourished my fascination with fungi, providing an outlet for my creative expression and a virtual community where I've been able to build friendships and learn from experts. Through my @Fascinated by Fungi social media accounts, I've been able to reach and teach millions of people about the amazing diversity of fungi, presenting visually stunning, emotionally engaging, and entertaining educational content. My hope is that exposing people to mushrooms and other fungi will inspire them to learn more on their own and take an active role in advocating for and helping to conserve threatened habitats. Writing this book is the culmination of all of my educational outreach I have done through social media. This project has served as a way for me to solidify my own knowledge while also sharing with others what I wish I had known when I first started foraging. This book is intended as an in-depth introduction to the fungal kingdom, exploring not only macrofungi like mushrooms and lichens, but also the wild world of microfungi, including yeasts, molds, and aquatic fungi, that through both broad overviews and specific examples. You can read it all the way through, or bounce around at will, as I often do when I'm excited about a topic. The chapters are organized in a question and answer format, so you can jump to the parts that you're most curious about. The mushroom morphology section is meant to act as a companion to other field guides, helping you to translate what you see into language you can use to research and identify fungi. The fungal profiles are not intended as a strict identification guide, but rather as an introduction to the edible, toxic, functional, and otherwise common mushrooms you might encounter. There are QR codes throughout the book that link you to inaturalist.org and other specific resources that help provide more educational context and additional examples of the fungi mentioned. The full endnotes and cited references are also available via QR code and that link to my website. The first mention of glossary terms in the book are denoted in bold. For this audio version, I'll just explain them to you rather than forcing you to go read the glossary, which you don't have access to. The ways we study fungi are shifting quickly, and what we know is constantly evolving. While I can't cover all the details and nuances of fungi in this book, I do my best to present the most up-to-date and accurate information. I really did. However, chances are that new understandings will have emerged by the time this book is published, and they already have, but thankfully I'm able to update stuff on my website. Scientific names and classifications are especially prone to change. Always keep an open mind to new possibilities and be ready to adapt your perceptions based on novel data. This is one of the things as a scientist I have to constantly, you make a statement and then something new comes out and you have to sort of shift your understanding to integrate this new data into your sort of conception of how things work. So I'm always open to that as long as there's good data. Despite a history of fear and misinformation surrounding mushrooms, society is finally coming around to perceiving fungi as friends. We are witnessing the dawning of a new era of fungal appreciation. Now is the time to give fungi our full attention and understanding, recognizing their interconnected nature and the essential roles they play worldwide. My hope is that this book will fuel your personal curiosity and inspire you to follow your own fascination with fungi. So that is the introduction to my book, Passport to Kingdom Fungi. I will hopefully come back and read you the rest of the book. If you guys want to hear more from me, check out my website, fascinatedbyfungi.com, You can find Passport Kingdom Fungi pretty much anywhere books are sold. And as always, feel free to check out my social media or my podcast. So I will sign off for now. But thank you guys for being here, and I hope you come and listen to the rest of the book as I broadcast. Stay fast and by fungi, friends.